Fox News alert for you now. Carrie Fisher, dead at the age of 60. The movie star and writer suffered a heart attack on Friday on a flight from London to Los Angeles, and she has now passed away. Fox News' Anita Vogel will have a live report coming up at the bottom of the hour with more details on what comes next for the memorial and what happened. Sean.
More on that ahead, but Democrats are looking back, still struggling to figure out what went wrong for them in the 2016 election, resulting in Hillary Clinton's devastating loss. Well, now Vice President Joe Biden is putting some of the blame on elitism. Is that a fair assessment? Josh Kraushaar is politics editor for the National Review. I've never thought of elitism as being one of the Democratic Party's hallmarks or strong points, maybe weaknesses in this case. What's the vice president saying, Josh?
Well, what Joe Biden sees is how poorly Hillary Clinton did in towns like Joe Biden's hometown of Scranton, Pennsylvania, a lot of working class towns across the country where Donald Trump won by a historically large margin. And these are areas that many of them voted Democratic in recent elections. They voted for President Obama in 2008 and 2012. So Joe Biden thinks that the party has gotten too elite. They've focused too much on sort of the liberal affluent base at the expense of working class voters. And he has a point. He thinks I think in hindsight, he thinks he may have been able to win some of those voters that Hillary Clinton was unable to win over in 2016.
Well, and talk about liberal and affluent. When you find out somebody's getting $250,000 to give a speech, you know, that kind of sums up the problem that Hillary Clinton had relating to people.
Yeah, she was a uniquely weak candidate for the very voters that she lost in the Midwest and among that working class set of voters. At the same time, though, she had some baggage in trying to defend President Obama's policies. I mean, President Obama has a solid job approval rating, but when you look under the numbers, when you look under the hood, a lot of his particular proposals were not very popular. A lot of voters, a majority of voters, disapproved of his handling of foreign policy. His health care law was very unpopular. So Hillary Clinton had a unique challenge of trying to both energize the president's base while trying to win over these working class voters who didn't like the president's policies. And that was a very difficult thread to needle.
In this interview, he talks about sitting in his office one day in October and watching a Donald Trump rally in Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, Pennsylvania, again, kind of where he grew up. And he said to himself, or maybe to the people in his office, he said, we might lose this election. Now, I don't think of too many political experts who were saying in October that Donald Trump was going to win.
No, and Joe Biden saw the trend lines before the election, and it's pretty remarkable that Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, and that northeastern corner of Pennsylvania voted for Obama in large numbers, both in 2008 and 2012, and it swung to Donald Trump in 2016. Hillary Clinton's performance there was about as poor, and the trend lines were as poor as any part of the country. So Joe Biden has his finger on the political pulse as to why Democrats lost so many votes in his hometown. But at the same time, it would have been challenging for anyone, any Democrat, to defend some of the policies that the president advanced in his second term. And there was a lot of baggage that Obama himself had that cost Democrats this election.
Your own National Journal has an interesting piece by Charlie Cook in which he talks about the analytics of this election. That was supposed to be Hillary Clinton's strong point. Her team was supposed to be able to mine data and motivate particular groups of voters, and it failed them. Why?
Well, you can have as much data as you want, but if you don't know how to interpret the data, then you're going to have a big problem. And Hillary Clinton's campaign spent more money in Arizona and in Nebraska than they did in Wisconsin and Michigan, which ended up swinging to Donald Trump. So they didn't see the working class white vote shift in the final weeks of the campaign away from them, and they decided to spend their money in states that Donald Trump comfortably won. So when you look at all the data in the world, it doesn't help you if you can't interpret it correctly. And they had a lot of money spent on data analytics, but they couldn't understand what that data showed, and they weren't reliant enough on the polls that suggested that Hillary Clinton was struggling badly with these working class white voters.
And as the president-elect is not shy to point out, they spent a lot more money than he did and still lost the election.
Moneyball. That's the Trump campaign played Moneyball, and the Hillary Clinton's campaign spent a lot of money and didn't get a lot of bang for their buck.
Josh Kraushaar from National Journal. Thanks.
Thanks, John.
All right, when we come back, we have more reaction on the untimely passing of Carrie Fisher. Also, new developments in the investigation into the deadly Berlin terror attack as we learn where the prime suspect was in the hours before he was killed in a shootout with police. Plus, new fallout from the UN vote condemning Israeli settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem and the role the U.S. played, with word now of, quote, ironclad information linking the White House to the language in the controversial resolution, what needs to be done now, and why a former UN spokesman says the world body really shouldn't have gotten involved in the first place. We'll go in depth when we come back.
A Fox News alert, and her fellow actors and actresses are reacting to the news that Carrie Fisher has died at the age of 60. The movie star and screenwriter suffered a fatal heart attack Friday on a flight from London to Los Angeles. Ultimately fatal, I should say. She has just passed away today. Whoopi Goldberg just tweeted, Carrie Fisher has passed. She was funnier and smarter than anyone had the right to be. Sail on, Silver Girl. Condolences, Debbie and Billy. Rest in peace. Billy, her only surviving, her only daughter, I should say. Carrie Fisher dead at the age of 60.
So right now, Israel intensifying its attack on the U.S. for not blocking an anti-Israel resolution by using its veto power in the Security Council. Instead, our ambassador broke with past practice and abstained from the vote, allowing it to pass on Friday. Now, a spokesman for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says there is, quote, ironclad information that the White House crafted the resolution and pushed hard for its passage. This as Ben Rhodes, the president's deputy national security advisor, defended the Obama administration's position on the settlement issue, adding that the White House had raised concerns about it in the past.
When we see laws that aim to legalize outposts, when we see rhetoric that suggests that this is the most pro-settlement Israeli government in history, and when we see the facts on the ground, again, deep into the West Bank, beyond the separation barrier, we feel compelled to speak up against those actions.
Oof. Joining us now is Rick Grenell. He is former advisor to 4 U.S. ambassadors to the United Nations and a Fox News contributor. Sir, thank you for joining us. First of all, what do you make of this idea that there is ironclad evidence that the U.S. was deeply involved in crafting this document?
Well, look, I could see it on Twitter. I could see the French ambassador to the United States talking about how the United States was being helpful and that they were looking at this resolution and that they were trying to convince the Obama administration. So I think the evidence was clear. Anyone watching what was going on at the UN Security Council could see this flirtation. Look, Melissa, as someone who spent 8 years inside the Security Council, this is an easy problem to get rid of. When experts meet early on to discuss language of a resolution, the United States representative should show up and say, this will be vetoed. We are not going to engage in a resolution that tries to have the international community telling Israel which lands to give up. I mean, look, this is a typical land dispute between two countries, and the international community should not be trying to pronounce on this issue and push other countries. This resolution is dangerous because it calls on other countries now to punish Israel for not giving up land.
So what are the implications? I mean, what do you think was behind the Obama administration's stand? What were they trying to signal? And then what are the implications for the U.S. going forward?
Well, this was a sneaky attack from the Obama administration right at the end of their administration. There's just no explanation why they vetoed a 2011 resolution, but then at the last minute, I mean, look, I think they lost an election. This election was a rejection of the Obama foreign policy. They knew what was coming. They had Democrats lobbying them, high-profile Democrats saying, do not allow this resolution to go forward. So President Obama and really Ben Rhodes, who's been running our foreign policy for a long time, we just saw that clip where he said he was outraged that there was this land dispute and that Israel was building settlements on what they classified as their land. Look, it's one thing to say that you have an opinion about a land dispute between two countries, but it's quite another to reject U.S. policy, decades of U.S. policy, and then engage in trying to tell a country how to solve that dispute from the outside. We have a long-standing U.S. policy that the two parties should talk amongst themselves and they should figure this out. This is a typical land dispute that arises after wars, and they should be able to figure it out.
So what are the implications going forward for the Trump administration as they come in? Because they have signaled out of the gate that Israel is our friend. You know, that Donald Trump does not believe that President Obama has treated Israel with the respect it deserves. At least that was the rhetoric. What does this force the president-elect into a corner to take action? What does it mean?
Well, look, I would advise the Trump administration to stand with Israel and to recognize that they've got to do two things. One, you got to offer a resolution that's going to reverse this so that it's not a standing resolution to punish Israel, because that's what this resolution actually encourages countries to stand against Israel on this land dispute. And then two, if they won't change the resolution and they won't redo it, then I think the United States has to be very clear that any country that tries to punish Israel for not giving up land or entering this equation and taking sides, any country that does that, the United States should act diplomatically against. We should make it clear in our policy that this was a mistake and that you shouldn't implement this resolution in any way. And if you do, there will be a diplomatic issue, and we will stand against it. We will stand with Israel.
Rick Grenell, thank you for coming on. Appreciate your time. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Some new information now on the prime suspect in the Berlin terror attack and where he was before he died in a shootout with Italian police. Surveillance cameras capturing Anis Amri in Italy at Milan's central train station just an hour before he was killed. Investigators say he was the man who drove a truck into a crowd of shoppers at a Christmas market a little more than a week ago, killing 12 and injuring dozens more. ISIS claimed responsibility for that deadly attack.
We have continuing coverage of the death of Carrie Fisher with a live report from Los Angeles that's straight ahead. Also, chaos at malls across the country as fights break out. What we know about the cause and whether they were organized online.
Fox News alert, and Carrie Fisher is dead at the age of 60. The movie star and writer suffered a heart attack Friday on a flight from London to Los Angeles. She has passed away now today. Anita Vogel has more from Los Angeles. Anita?
Yeah, well, hi there, John. Of course, we're just hearing this sad news this morning. It might be a little surprising to some because we had been hearing she was in stable condition ever since she suffered this massive heart attack on Friday. Just to recap what we know, it was last Friday when she suffered this massive heart attack on a flight from London to Los Angeles. Passengers on the plane said she had stopped breathing and she was in quite a bit of distress. When she landed, paramedics were standing by. They treated her aggressively and took her to a local hospital. At the time, her uncle told the media her medical condition was brought upon by a combination of fatigue and too much travel. She was reportedly in stable condition. On Saturday, her brother reported that she was in critical condition. And then, of course, this morning, the very sad news that she had, in fact, passed away at the age of 60. She was the daughter of Eddie Fisher and Debbie Reynolds, really Hollywood royalty. She was an actress and a writer and, of course, best known for playing the role of Princess Leia in the original Star Wars. In her first and best known book, Postcards from the Edge, she wrote about her turbulent relationship with her mother, drug addiction, mental health issues. In the past, she said she was bipolar. She had been addicted to cocaine and prescription drugs. She was in London promoting her new book and filming the third season of a British TV comedy. She is, of course, loved by fans around the world and will be missed. I have to tell you that Twitter is absolutely blowing up with this news this morning. We're getting tweets this morning here from Ryan Seacrest, who says thoughts and prayers to Carrie Fisher's family. Carrie Fisher, another one from Seth Farland saying Carrie Fisher was smart, funny, talented, surprising, a hell of a fun time to be around. And the Family Guy will miss her intensely. And we are also hearing from her daughter, Billie Lourd, the one daughter she does leave behind. She says that her entire family thanks everyone for their thoughts and prayers. She was loved by the world, and she will be profoundly missed. Again, John, the sad news coming in this morning. 60 after suffering a massive heart attack on Friday. We'll, of course, have more on this story throughout the day, and we'll be, of course, hearing more from Reaction Around Hollywood. Back to you.
And for those of us who were a whole lot younger when she first premiered in Star Wars, it really makes us feel a lot older. What a loss. Thanks very much, Anita Vogel in Los Angeles.
And Kevin McCarthy is a film critic and a Fox News contributor. He joins us now live on the phone. Thanks so much for joining us. You know, obviously we heard that she had been traveling a lot and there was a lot of exhaustion involved. She was in London not promoting this film, but promoting her new book and also working on a series that she was filming. What does it mean, though, that this happens at a time when, you know, Rogue One just hit theaters? She's at the top of minds for so many people right now.
Oh, yeah, it's absolutely devastating. I mean, for people who, like me, who grew up on Star Wars, and I think anybody, I think she transcended just Star Wars. And Star Wars is such a cultural phenomenon that I think everybody has been touched by it somehow. And I think even if you aren't a movie fan, you know who Princess Leia, you know who Carrie Fisher was. And it's so weird to say was, considering she was so full of life. If you've seen her interviews, everything she did with her dog, I mean, Gary was the name of the dog, and she was just really, really funny, very, very witty. She was an incredible writer. And Princess Leia is probably what she's most known for, but she has written so many incredible books, screenplays, plays. Obviously, you mentioned Postcards from the Edge, which is the Meryl Streep film. That was based on her book and her screenplay. You know, for me growing up, I remember her in Blues Brothers. She was really funny in that. But, you know, it's a devastating thing to lose somebody who has touched so many lives. And one of the themes that I'm seeing all over Twitter right now is a lot of people saying how much of an icon and how much of a role model she was to them, just in regards to being an actress in this business, the characters that she played. I know she had a lot of things that were going wrong in her life, as you mentioned, but she was somebody on screen that portrayed a strong character. And I think a lot of people were really invested in that idea. You know, When Harry Met Sally was another great role of hers. She has done so many things. And here's the thing, and it is sad when someone passes, but the beauty of being an actress and being in this business and having these movies is that she will live on forever. I mean, anybody can go home tonight and watch Star Wars. Anybody can go home tonight and put her book on, read her book, watch one of her films, and that's kind of the beauty of what actors and musicians and anybody out there who's in the entertainment business can give us, that we can still continue to watch their work forever. So it is very, very sad, and I'm kind of in shock. I had absolutely no idea this is going to happen. I mean, obviously we knew Friday she had a heart attack, but I was hoping that she was in stable condition, as her mom said. So I don't know. It's very upsetting.
Okay. Kevin McCarthy, thank you for sharing your thoughts. Appreciate your time. John.
No, thank you.
China makes a bold military move, sailing its aircraft carrier group into the disputed waters of the South China Sea. We'll take a look at what kind of message this sends to China's neighbors and to the U.S. military as well.
Right now, China's only aircraft carrier is sailing in the contested waters of the South China Sea. The carrier and the group of 5 other warships were spotted heading into open water to conduct what China calls routine exercises. But neighboring countries say Beijing is trying to send a message about its military capability. Gordon Chang is an Asian analyst and author of the book Nuclear Showdown: North Korea Takes on the World. Sir, thank you for joining us. What do you make of this aggression?
I think the important point here is that, of course, China is trying to intimidate its neighbors and the United States, and it shows that the Chinese military has become so much more influential in policy-making circles in Beijing. And that's a bad sign, because military officers have a view of the world that is sharply different from that of not only the countries in the region, but of course in Washington as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to juxtapose it. It happens on a day when you have the president having bilateral meetings with the Japanese prime minister today around Pearl Harbor, sort of closing the book on this chapter of the relationship between Japan and the U.S., but at the same time, you look at what's going on with China and how it has become, is it fair to say, one of the lead aggressors in the region? I mean, I guess you'd have to also look at its relationship with Korea and Korea with its neighbors.
Well, absolutely. You know, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe is not apologizing to the United States, but the U.S. and Japan, as you say, have closed the book on World War II. Japan has so many times apologized to the Chinese for World War II,
right,
but Beijing won't let it go. And today we have seen from state media and the foreign ministry some very provocative statements about Abe's visit to Pearl Harbor.
So how do you put that in context for our viewers? Because when you look at the aggression that's going on with China, we have a lot of pots that are sort of boiling over all around the world. Whether you're looking at the Middle East, looking at what's going on with Russia, how big of a threat, how would you categorize it?
Well, China grabbed Scarborough Shoal from the Philippines in 2012 in an act of naked aggression. The United States didn't do anything about that. And so right now, China has sort of enlarged the problem by now starting to say it wants not only the Senkaku Islands from Japan, but also Okinawa and the rest of the Ryukyu chain. This is a country whose territorial ambitions have been expanding because there's been very little pushback from the international community. The one thing about Abe going to Pearl Harbor is that for many Japanese, this is the end, the symbolic end of World War II. It means that Japan can now act independently in the region to defend itself and to help the United States. So that is a very good thing because Japan and the U.S., a very powerful combination.
At the same time, I mean, we see the temperature rising between the future administration and China. Donald Trump has talked a lot about trade relations with China, but he's also addressed this very specific issue of sort of the island grab, the military aggression. How do you think his relationship will be different?
Well, Trump is basically saying to the Chinese, look, you know, you challenge American administrations in their first months. You did that with President Bush. You did it with President Obama. What Trump is doing is he's saying the United States is setting the agenda, not China, and he's doing it before he took the oath of office. So this is an important change in the relationship. Basically, he's saying to the Chinese, I'm not afraid of you. And that's an important message that we need to get across to Beijing.
Yeah, Gordon Chang, thanks for your time today.
Thanks, Melissa.
A weekend of chaos at malls across the country as fights break out. There's been some speculation they might have been organized online. If so, what's the legal fallout? Oh, no.